My name is Shyleen Momanyi. I'm a young feminist. I'm really passionate in working with women and adolescent girls in Kenya. And I work for Young Women's Leadership Institute. Organizing and movement building. So we do grassroots movement building. So we work with young feminists at the grassroots level. We also do leadership and capacity building sessions for adolescent girls and young women, and specifically on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And last year we were actually privileged to be part of the global processes, and that is being part of Beijing Plus 25, and now also being part of the UN binding treaty process, which YWLI really, it was a platform for us to organize or bring together young women, young feminists from Kenya to be part of a global process, which is really important for us because if you speak about Beijing Platform for Action, this is where this is a very critical area for us to really reflect on, just looking at the women's rights journey. Where did it begin from? And now how do other young women and adolescent girls adapt some of the achievements and also keep on influencing the kind of change that we want to really achieve women's and girls' rights? So for us, it's about organizing, movement building, and also just ensuring that women and girls' voices are heard at all levels. YWLI first is a center, is a feminist center for building young women's capacities on leadership, and therefore the first thing that we do is actually hold trainings, feminist trainings for adolescent girls and young women to really realize what feminist leadership is, what does transformational leadership mean in our society. Yeah, so ensuring that we impart that kind of knowledge in adolescent girls and ensuring that they understand the kind of change that they'd love to bring in their communities is very critical at this point. And also part of it is ensuring that young women take part in decision-making processes, supporting young women, holding programs that then ensure that we support them to take up leadership positions in various places, be it in organizations, be it at community level, and also at the political level. It is so important to ensure that young women and adolescent girls normalize women taking up leadership, because in our society, we all know that the society has put forward a man as being the leader. But then for us, it is to challenge that and ensure that young women normalize. It is important because, number one, we are able to actually achieve our rights. We are able to achieve the gender equality that we need. We are able to present our issues so that then they are able to be they're taken care of by the government. But if we don't have women or young women representing other young women, it is then problematic. It's only women who understand the kind of issues or underlying issues, the challenges that women go through on the ground. So them taking up that kind of leadership and being able to represent, being able to challenge the kind of impunity within the government, within communities, within organizations, then we definitely will not achieve gender equality, will not achieve women's rights. But then we are also introducing a Girls Advisory Council. So the Girls Advisory Council is a highlight for us in 2021 because we'd love adolescent girls to be part of the decision-making level at YWLI. So we'll be introducing that in 2020. So how we're going to do this is the Girls Advisory Council will be part of the programming team. They will work closely with the co-director, who will be their mentor, who will be supporting them and also training them in terms of leadership, how to contribute to our programs, taking part in certain decisions that involve girls, and also just holding accountable the YWLI staff. So for the feminist leadership training, what we actually do is have young feminists or young women who are leaders at the different communities. We mobilize them, we train them. So we hold like a training of trainers. Let's say a 1 week or 3-day training, an intensive training whereby young women really understand or realize, once you walk into the room, you definitely, at times you're blank, you really don't understand what feminism is. But then you go through a training whereby you're educated on feminism, you then come out like realizing, you know what? Yes, I want to be a feminist. I want to be a feminist leader. And this is what feminism is all about. So our training is majorly for young women to really understand what feminism is, and for them to realize, like, it comes from them. They realize that this is what feminism is and this is what I want to do. So we do trainings. We also do meetings, one-on-one meetings at the grassroots with feminist leaders. We also have like one-on-one reading sessions with the young women, adolescent girls, just to understand, maybe we say a topic on sexual and reproductive health and rights and how it's related to leadership, how you accept your body, it all starts with you. Sexual and reproductive health and rights, I choose to be who I am. It means then you can also tell someone else to be comfortable with who they are. So then that the relationship between SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and leadership is very important for people to really accept who they are, to stand with who they are, and then they're able to move forward and even stand before people to speak. So the urgency that that young women and adolescent girls have to embrace for them to also go out to be able to lead. So we create a platform whereby other young social media influencers are able to learn on feminism, on different aspects of leadership, and also just ensuring that they have a space whereby they are able to feel safe. The online space is not a very safe space, especially for activists, and therefore YWLI provides that space for people to be able to organize together to reduce that risk of one activist being targeted. So if we have a campaign on a specific issue, then we organize other online influencers to be able to back each other up. You get it? So it is easier to really organize as a group in the online space. So the online space has really been part of YWLI most critical area in terms of our work. The participation of young women in terms of organizing has really been tremendous. For us, for instance, because we are also speaking in relation to COVID-19. So last year, YWLI has been organizing with grassroots young feminists in Kenya. So last year, we really saw how young women, young feminists at the grassroots came together to build that sisterhood, to be there for each other, to come up with campaigns to support other young women who did not have food, maybe to get food for them, to get clothing, to get shelter, and also be part of and also ensure that they were safe in terms of, because last year we had like some of the things that were not really unseen. For instance, violence against women has been an issue for a very long time, and our governments have like this. It has been an issue that has been ignored, even though we have policies that then protect women. But then last year, that's when we had so many stories being reported, and now the government was saying that it is because of COVID, yet it wasn't because of COVID, really. It has been an issue that has been happening. So a lot of young women and adolescents, young women and feminist leaders at the grassroots supported young women and families who went through violence. They ensured that these cases were followed on. They ensured that the cases were reported. They ensured that they spread news and ensured that they brought together other organizations that could support the victims or survivors of violence. We also saw young feminists organizing to on different campaigns in the online space as well as in the public space to end violence against women. So for us, from all these trainings and organizing and bringing women together or young feminists together, just for them to understand why it is important for sisterhood, why it is important to organize. And then we also saw it happen in reality last year, whereby they actually stood up. They were so resilient. They came out to support each other during a difficult time, because for these young women, and especially those at the grassroots, these are organizations at times that are not funded at all because they lack structures. And also these are organizations, these are young women who really depend on organizations such as Young Women to be supported in terms of implementation of activities. So seeing them just come out strongly, even without funds, to be able to advocate for change in community was really a great thing for us. And then it really shows that there's still hope, that there are people who are ready to be there for each other, that sisterhood really exists among young feminists, among adolescent girls. That also, it also shows the importance of movement building, creating stronger movements, among young feminists is really important, because you cannot do it alone. So there are so many challenges. There are many things that young women and feminists are facing in Kenya right now. So first, to speak about violence against women and sexual violence again, and to be specific on sexual violence against women and femicide. So from the past years, we've had young women being sexually violated and being killed brutally. This has gone public, but then one of the things that we really have a challenge with is our government. it doesn't protect their people. We have certain laws, certain policies that protect women from violence, that have guidelines to protect women from violence, but then that is not being implemented. So we've had so many young women being killed, especially from intimate partner relationships in Kenya right now, and the killings are still ongoing. Another issue is funding for young women, or young women organizing, and especially for the grassroots organization. So these are organizations that really do a lot of work at the ground through goodwill, or depending on organizations such as Young Women's Leadership Institute to get funding to be able to support them. So it is really a challenge for them, because there are a lot of needs for young women. There are not a lot of needs, for instance, sanitary pads, because when you talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights, most people feel that once you talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights, then you should be able to provide certain products, such as menstrual hygiene products. And for us, the Kenyan government has the responsibility to provide sanitary towels, especially in school. But then this is an initiative that does not work for those who are not going to school, because we have girls who go to school and there are those girls who are out of school. So this only works for girls in school, and those girls out of school then are left without, and therefore are always depending on either organizations to provide that, or maybe also fall into victims of sexual violence to acquire sanitary pads. Another issue that young women are also facing, or adolescent girls are also facing in Kenya, is the economic injustices. So we really, the Kenyan population, most of the Kenyan populations are really live from hand to mouth, and such women then, and especially young women and girls, find themselves in such certain situations whereby they are left to engage in they're left to engage in certain certain things that then to provide for their families. For instance, they get into sex work. Sex work is really is not a very safe safe space, especially for adolescent girls. And being that they are underage, it is really a tricky situation for such girls, because they end up they are not able to negotiate for their payment. They're not able to negotiate for protection. These girls then get into certain situations whereby you get that they're oppressed by their clients. But then they have nothing to do at all. And also, even apart from the adolescent girls, the sex workers also get victimized, they get beaten, but then they have nowhere to report. This is because of stigma around sex work. You'll not go to report that someone beat me, and yet this is a client you actually do not know. At times you do not know such the client, because they're not like someone you live with on a daily basis. This is someone you just met on the roadside, or in a club or somewhere. We look at violence from a wider perspective, and not just a violence against women at the homestead, but also just looking at the difference or the diversity of how violence is perpetrated. That is from sex workers to also the corrective rape, that is in terms of for the LGBTQ persons, and also looking at a femicide, which is really a big issue, and young feminists have been organizing around that. Yeah. Women leadership and equal participation of women in leadership and decision-making spaces is really critical in ensuring that women and girls achieve equal gender equality, as well their rights, and also just ensuring that we challenge oppression and the economic injustices that really exist. So number one, I felt that if we have equal participation of women, it then means in political spaces, it then means that women are able to influence and support each other to ensure that policies and laws that protect women and girls from violence against women then are protected and they are implemented for us to achieve justice. Also, mobilizing the efforts of women in leaders, and also being mentors to other young women to be able to see, you know what, we can still take up leadership, being hope to other generations of women. You know, it is a challenge getting into leadership because of the backlash from society and also from the public, but then having more women taking up leadership means that it is hope for other generations of women, other generations of girls and women to take up leadership. And that means that our rights will be protected, that we'll have a say in terms of decision making. Because if we don't have women, for instance, I remember, is it last year, where we had at a committee of men, of all men, discussing about abortion for women, which is really an issue of, it's really not an issue of women, but this is something that affects women, and therefore women need to be in that decision-making table to be able to, you know, to express themselves, say how early pregnancies, how if people have to make choices, then it is up to them. It is their body to speak about body agency and what it really means to them. But then if you have other people speaking for you, it means that you don't get favor. I think holding governments accountable is really, really a challenge. Is a big challenge, because they will promise that they will do something, they will commit to something, but then when it comes to implementing, it is an issue. So if you don't have allies within the political space, because when you talk about policies, then you are speaking about political making spaces. So if women are not in there to be your allies, to be your eyes, to be your ears, to help, to support you in terms of influencing, they will definitely influence other male to support some of your priorities. For me, I wasn't really ready for the kind of situation that came about last year. At first, I was so anxious because this was the first time we were in a lockdown. Actually, we were not able to come out. We were not able to like interact physically with friends, you know, and therefore the anxiety of how even people were losing their jobs, and also having, you know, when you're like the firstborn in a family, it then means that you have you have the care responsibility thing to do with the family, and therefore it really created a lot of anxiousness. I got kind of sick, stressed, but then having support from my colleagues and also just being there for each other as an organization, it then meant that we were able to support each other and really move on well. And for now, I feel that I really learned a lot from what happened last year. And for me, I'll say it wasn't an easy situation because it wasn't planned. From individual level to the government, this wasn't something that was planned because we've had, for instance, in terms of budgeting, you never budget for of course you do budgets for different departments and medical issues, education and stuff, but then last year was really a big burden in the health sector, and therefore lots of budgets then were shifted to the health department, leaving other departments with either less funds or no funds to support other ongoing issues, which then disrupted the economy of the country, which then goes down to individuals. Once the government or the economy of the government of the nation is affected, then it means you're also affected because you need to dig deeper into your pocket to really ensure that you get stuff. So for me, it was really a learning experience for me, even of how do we engage our participants or our beneficiaries, who are young feminists, young women and adolescent girls, better in the future, to ensure that in times of pandemic, how do we reach out to them effectively, because we no longer met publicly. We were meeting in the online spaces. We sought solutions to ensure that we really got to interact with them, since they are part of our activities. But I'm really glad that from a personal level, we were able to learn on how to really move forward, but also beyond COVID-19, because this is a virus that we will live with, and therefore it was really a wake-up call. It was really a wake-up call because people were, I feel that we were all in our comfort zones, that we were okay, the world is okay, business as usual. But then we had something that just slapped on our faces and we were like, yeah, you need to be awake. Most of the, during COVID-19, most of the funds had then also shifted to COVID-19 response, and therefore there were very, very little funds coming in to support other activities such as sexual and reproductive health and rights, leadership, so there were really limited funds, even though there were open calls, but then the funds that were going out were also limited. But then we really appreciate that we had organizations or partners like Womankind who really supported in terms of resilience funds, because for us, I think we could have also shut down our organization because we had to keep on paying rent in the places that we in our offices. People needed to get at least a paycheck to support themselves in terms of rent, to support themselves in terms of food. Most of our work are community outreaches. So once there was a lockdown, then we were not able to continue with our activities that were set before, especially the public organizing like the public organizing, and therefore we had to go online. And online, I've mentioned that there are spaces whereby there are young feminists and young women who live in the rural areas, especially in Kwale County. We work in a constituency whereby there is an issue with internet and network connectivity, and therefore we really had a hard time working in the area at that particular place. But then what we actually did was to have some of the young women who were able to have nice smartphones, and then we send airtime or money for them to buy bundles. They're able to subscribe and then organize in groups, and then we are able to set up from our office, then have meetings with them. So it wasn't really an easy thing. So for us, it was a learning that even though we moved to the online space, we still have beneficiaries or young women and adolescent girls who are not able to access the online space as well. So what are other ways can we work in case there is another pandemic? What other ways can we use to ensure that we reach out to them? So one of the things that we YWLI is also doing is to ensure that we have mobilizers in the different parts of the counties that we work. So the mobilizers will be, so we will be in contact with the mobilizers. So in case we have any activity that we can't actually be there physically, then they have to organize because we've trained them. So we ensure that they have the training to continue training others. So instead of YWLI going in person in most of the activities, so the mobilizers can do that. Number one is the issue of violence, that and also just to say that women and girls, you know, when you're locked with your perpetrator during the lockdown, we do not have enough centers that could take in survivors, and therefore young women, young adolescent girls and girls were locked up with the perpetrators for a very long time, with nowhere to go, nowhere to report, because the police were busy keeping security and also keeping watch on the different boundaries that they had locked down, and therefore there was no specific way in that young women and adolescent girls were able to report violence cases. They could not walk into a police station because we were in a total lockdown. People were not going into the public. It really wasn't a good thing to see, and for us it is a call to action to ensure that we come up with different ways in which young women and adolescent girls can reach us, even without walking into a police station. For instance, coming up with an emergency number, which I think after different campaigns and organizations calling to action, calling the government into action, that's when the government of Kenya, I think, came up with an emergency number whereby people could report violence and also get sexual and reproductive health and rights support. So it's also to just ensure that we have many of the emergency numbers, many of emergency spaces whereby young girls and women can run to, you know, and also advocating for safe spaces. We really don't have reliable safe spaces whereby women can have shelter. And that is something that we really need to also advocate for. in terms of funding, I think as a young women's organization, it is very important that we keep on fundraising, to ensure that we have we keep on fundraising and also have a sustainable way of ensuring that we have funds throughout the year, because people really lost their jobs. People lost their they lost their jobs and salaries, and for us we were very lucky that we are still here, you know. It is really a call for us to have a way in which we can have a sustainable source of money, as well as be able to generate our own, you know, locally. How do we generate? How do we come up with campaigns that can generate money for women's work, you know? I think it was very important for women to be part of COVID-19 decision-making processes in terms of planning, in terms of budgeting, because for me, I feel that there were so many issues on women that were not planned for, which were also in line with COVID. You know, even with COVID, it didn't mean that women did not stop giving birth, you know. With COVID, it didn't mean that women stopped accessing health facilities for other issues and not really COVID-19. It didn't mean that, and also the violence response was very, very poor. So I think it was really important for women to be a part of the COVID-19 planning process, budgeting process, so that then they could ensure, you know, for a woman, she could definitely, for women, they could definitely oversee and say, this is a lockdown. Women will be locked at home. There are those who will give birth in the morning, at night, in the evening. How will they get to the hospital? And how do we ensure that we have, for those who have maybe health facilities or dispensaries, the small hospitals, how do we equip them to ensure that they are able to respond to women's needs at this particular time when specific hospitals are taking care of COVID-19 patients, you know? I think that is something that was failed, that the governments failed to do, because they didn't take into consideration that beyond COVID-19, that there are other health needs for women and girls. And I'd like to speak for women and girls because that's who we are about. Yeah. They also, in terms of access to contraception, at that time we have youth-friendly services. Youth-friendly services were closed because those who are running those facilities were taken to other hospitals for COVID response, you know. So these youth-friendly services, this is where young women and adolescent girls can get sexual and reproductive health and rights information. They're able to get contraceptions. They're able to get services on for different sexual and reproductive health and rights services, you know. So for me, I think just ensuring that we have more women in these spaces, then definitely they are able to think beyond, you know, they're able to think beyond COVID. They could be able to say we needed certain services even beyond just the response. Of course, COVID response was very critical at the moment, but then also women are giving birth. Women need contraceptions because they are at home. Sex work, their time is always in the evenings and in the night. That is the most of them operate during that time, you know. And during lockdown and curfew hours, it then meant that they do not have a source of income because they're not able to go out to do their work. There's curfew. I think this is something that also a woman in leadership who really understands feminist leadership, what it really means, could also have looked into in terms of proper budgeting for COVID as a COVID response issue. You know, it's not about the health; it's also about the well-being of others and the financial status of other people who are then affected during COVID-19. Yeah. Also, speaking about the small businesses which were also locked down, I think we women could have looked at it differently, especially if we had a feminist leader, because for them, they could have deeply analyzed the different situations during COVID to then respond better on different issues in terms of planning, in terms of budgeting, and in terms of ensuring that women were safe from violence. So women came together in so many different ways. Number one, in organizing to ensure that we had different campaigns to end violence against women, and also call on the government to put guidelines or emergency lines to support violence victims. They also came together to contribute towards food drives, giving out clothing and also shelter for those who did not have food in different areas, especially in the slums of Nairobi and Kisumu. We also had women who came together to educate other young women in the grassroots as well as in the rural areas on COVID-19 restrictions, what to do exactly. Some did different videos in the online space to educate others on COVID-19 restrictions and as well as COVID-19 guidelines. So feminism to me is collective action and sisterhood towards ensuring that we fight and advocate for women's rights. So it is a fight for equality, a fight for equal opportunities for women and girls, the freedom of women and girls in terms of exercising their rights, freedom from violence. So it is the inner me that decides that I need to advocate for women's and girls' rights. That I believe in access to equal opportunity for women and girls. I believe in gender equality. I believe that women and girls, men and boys are all equal in terms of public and economic spheres. So it is a belief that an inner belief from someone who believes that women, girls, boys and men are all equal and deserve equal exercising of their rights and that human rights are women's rights. That is it. Feminist leadership means being able to advocate for women and girls' rights, for their freedom, and also being able to take up leadership to challenge oppression, to challenge impunities, to hold people accountable in order to achieve women and girls' rights and also their freedom. So feminist leadership is also about it's also about supporting each other, being there for each other, taking up action for social change. That there's a certain goal that you need to achieve, which is women's rights, and therefore you are dedicated to ensure that you take part in challenging the impunities, in challenging oppression, for social change. So the end goal is social change. A feminist leader is a believer in women's rights, a supporter, and dedicated to achieving gender equality.